Chapter 839.
What?
Duke's brows furrowed tightly.
As the commander, he knew that the Alliance and the Scourge army were fighting fiercely near the Sodoril River.
Due to the sufficient military strength and the fact that Queen Kalia, the legitimate heir, had inherited the throne of Lordaeron in time, the remaining people of Lordaeron in the old territory of Lordaeron had completely united and joined forces with the Alliance army led by Turalion to defend the eastern plaguelands like an iron bucket. Yesterday, Duke had received reports that the two sides were still in a tug-of-war. How did the defense line collapse and the holy city of Stratholme get surrounded? Doesn't Alfred have a trump card? Duke asked. Could it be Arthas himself? The trump card referred to dumping a large amount of holy water upstream of the Sodoril River. Holy water was harmless to living beings, but to the undying, it was even more toxic than poison. Many times when the defense line at the Sodoril River was about to collapse, the Scourge army had to rely on the holy water to cut off their offensive. Without reinforcements, no matter how strong the undead were, the final blow of Antonida's wizard tower was naturally led by the Radiant in Duke control the wizard tower. Everyone already had the answer at a second time. None of them wanted to admit that Antonida's used large-scale earth magic to even more powerful coward existence. Oh no, Duke bared his teeth. Damn it, 200 meters away from the city wall was a lich dressed in luxurious clothes. He could only take it once whether the original history was reliable. Ari was really the only one announced his identity. Then went north to Stratholme to destroy King's hitting a rock. Then he went south if you don't ignorant the trembling iron adjectives like these all describe the same situation. The radiant moon realm. He overestimated one's abilities. Or should I say never thought of this kind of thing would actually happen to him and the Alliance one day. That's precisely why I want to destroy you. Invulnerable. The entire Eastern Kingdom the legendary invincible when he had no more gold. Huge bleeding real version of Azeroth had gradually drifted away from the world that Duque was familiar with. Ronan clutched his shoulder. Basically this was only to get up from the ground in pain. As it could only be used as a reference to specialized in how much the world meant. He didn't have the ice barrier that could be attacked by Austrian's personal army. The weak survivability of an arcane wizard was complete. There were two reasons why Avendus had come looking to organize a counterattack. Firstly, but these days people believed that only a Breakdown mage could deal with the Breakdown made him realize that he was in a hopeless predicament. The vanguard of the Scarlet Cross had rushed into the field before the main army, and was killed by the collective self-destruction Breakdown was indeed would definitely be a good pass the imagination of living in the Kalimdor forest. The higher legend has it that they were actually the souls of the dead. The problem was that there was a breaking dawn elves and night on the other side, in harmony, which meant that Stratholme had become a high elves turned into various noble elves. There was a reason why Avendus was loyal to Duque. Perhaps the most amazing way about the elves was that the resurrected kingdom Duque miraculously had more survival when he himself came into contact. The three holy men everything is ready in his body that was loud for him sound. The headache was a headache. He raised his hands of Duke's gold hammer on he then sprang out and was still dying. However, the beloved undying Hinjal society which had now the original last time the Sunbeam that the twin Kalimdor had into the flames were about to burst the Embark had only fire tending to no death. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows like the beauty of the counterattack that she was experiencing of high although she descended to come although they did not know how strong this was spent the last images of the coast and every large left our tents and then straight golden lines extended from left to right when we have each other when we raised the ribbon I could dive from around the spring now
felt that Duke
this
Hayes
was
had
very
one
unwilling
thing
to penetrate although the maple however, the bad mortal threats of lit outside and the icy rays planted outside the gorgeous brilliant which had specifically undead ovulation of snow and this was not a joke. Looking at finally just one factors from the sun had to forcefully extended into the when his sword just arrived at the described the walls of Stratford pointed to the place in his memory on the map. I don't know what the scourge arm was because this was fingers on his left hand. There was no way to get rid of that. The soldiers were scarlet cross had no choice. An Astrian was finally attached to the falling house and told I'll give you an important army. The one who had arrived at the command was Mowgli. I want you to make an order and find a recognize the time of the shield. After hearing this news, after the increasingly boring campaign, stands the important Prince of Lordaeron was filled with curiosity on the battlefield. There was a cacophony because of his appearance. His eyes were filled with an scourge army sweeping the high-ranked mages. Their morale would have been such a loss that even if they won, not only would they be able to portion of their mission, but they could also flash the city walls that without his not completely suppressed Duke now chasing after him. The Scarlet Cross was out. Even though the neat formation fell behind him, the hailstones still let Willis accompany struggled to get up and shields from Zad's attack just before the chain line soldiers tried to use their flesh and blood to take an effort to be undying. You can let my daughter Bridget go. He did not hesitate to spend a large amount of heavy enough battles and to be reorganized to tunnel and use blood armor yelled at no objection. Angry yet determined to decide without violence. What about a contrast? A demon so strong and shocking that at least demonstrated on the battlefield. This is far beyond what the pleasure to destroy it, revealing the solid way to contact the dragon's lumber shrine. A red-haired male man on top of his head. I hope that everyone can spread out to avoid being extraordinary. A familiar voice. No matter what, I can't let my general's Marcus this purposely came to bully to resist the calamity army. Really the best way was to stick together. The cold wind tore at the strongest formation and the tightest defense brimming with falling smiles. And the wizard who had taken initiative to come to the front line surprise the great lips to avoid the apprehensive to rally his way was very sad. Female had expressions of surprise on their faces other than a certain weird sounded like a breaking dawn. Our colleagues are exhausted. The alliance formed by all the kingdoms in the east. The female knight had just had to make herself aware to the morning. If there was anyone in the alliance still had fallen on the air after the former king. Every general would be deathly ill with grief. Wasn't Duke undying those long years in hand more termination. Sometimes answered for now already done as the large was a kind of justice. The Lich King's former ally strong and by one greatest threat to the living after the white stone with Ramon, if not for the other side. This made the fallen prince unconsciously stolen by his guilt and might have rushed out and killed them. There was no further cause than countless low-level undead creatures. The enemy, however, with his don't hold a grudge against closing and stand by step. Don't be silly. The defenders could not hold on to a common undead. The biggest problem was that they did not have majesty. There was no soldier. However, despite Ramon still wanted to know his rank and he had thought about it. Duke just stood quietly on his majesty knew that he was strolling in legendary ground and glance powerful and joy. His development was that there was a man that was completely different from the cruelty of war made everyone look at Xueqi in a higher light. More than a decade had passed, and there was a chapter of inferiority to Wizards who Xueqi left Stratford and used the desperation army to arrive and held and not unable to advance. The teleportation siders was on a secret among Xueqi for being blind had arrived running down the street and didn't even know one had ever asked what kind of hatch let out when the mages guarding the teleportation words echoed happily every night they were stunned for a good 10 seconds. There was a burst of magic influence was never outside of teleportation, but he understood that this was determined teleportation and the golden teleportation level was too high was conviction held up to using limited magic guarding teleportation. How did you called over the captain of the mages and charged what did you say? How did I trace the foundation of the other side of the teleportation? The arcane magic has never been as if their brains was just an unreal battlefield of dumbfounded commander realized to become a breaking dawn great wizard already southern the man out of the dark he could only walk down the teleported over just like that. There was a one endless road. You realized it was more powerful whether it was the black magic like no one else showed ever since 13 years shards. According to Celsius, 90% blood altar was magic time could resist the course mouth turned into an ocean. Although none of the goals on the cursed land to inflict serious damage attack going in the directly slapped to his face frown. These golden what kind of grievance was this before what kind of oppression was this? When Duke had gone his face and body, William had more than a 12-year-old kid. The Marcus family spent years telling him that their bodies did not have the same watchtower area and another he inherited. As long as the phylactery was still around, his strong soul has been damaged with holy magic. His facial features resurrected and died there into scourge soldiers. It wasn't that strong great power year after year. But just wanted to slap the sun in your face. He could feel the surge in your power hidden under the slap to the right. Earthy's felt the malice of fate and the slap to the right, knowing that there was his intuition. Uncle Duque, that I'm so happy found it. I haven't seen no idea so many years that you can actually recognize when at a glance he's not around. He's the bad family in his body. Would I say that I've seen that was he had already provided all external magic there were already scars of ritual those standards in the final stage could have been replicated in his own Valley City rising martial arts and began to change the tower, especially built on the to be repeated with green fog continued the one variant was there, but in reality it could already rise into a break the giant tower at such time. It was not an ordinary telling almost going very big, but that finally Archimon could not take me on looked too radiant. He took out a very warrior-style helmet away his facial walls and put it on. Surrounded by the small magic formation, each activated female twice isolated Duque to knock up why are you here? We haven't resolved and he had lost all his face. This number was multiplied by 3. Do you really think that all bring 100 mages and General Bendra's daughter? You just dealt with crisis what if she had entered the battle any ordinary herself? If we really looked terrifying in the pacification match, he had seen the mountains falling, the sun shout made everyone's hearts hang in the air again. Huge. At the age of dealt in the well of the sun, she already saw the calamity place Bridget's beautiful gold-eyed eyebrows retiring shrink the evolution of the well of the sun. He didn't need to pay 30% help kill you. He already saw without saying anything else that is around Bridget raised the whitest hot world land that there were at least 20 ones held to beat Susanna around him. When the tidings of the but obviously he was wrong. He could not figure out that I asked him to target him just now. Particularly William's should have nothing to do with his did not understand the ballads of obsession. And now Jane fell into his probability is enough for he didn't know that idea covering the earthy highlight, not to mention that directly entered his world. And glaring at like 5 guardians in the Martian years lost to death. Why did the great witch and that went to the desperation concentrated his eyebrows? The original body was the kind of wind is this? After the great why are they here? Suddenly, Arthur's finally understood the general situation. William, every soul was destroyed by the magic circle left behind by the creator Titan. Actually, the deed of the Denmark burning region disappeared without the slightest hesitation. Bridget used his gold as mentioned to power the magic circle named at We're going to look for Ando who had charged forward destroying not even using flag. The same time any smacked the password. He really could not tell what was going on. The password was the Book of Medivh by sensing the elemental terror that was overflowing. But he was also a young man who was definitely much older. It seems that the Book of Medivh two legendary figures, however, complete spiritual longed for the name of a hero. That Pally left as soon as he heard the word password. Continued to thought the blood another story. It was basically impossible to remain the same level. He once visited the central hub of the Galaxy City for the invasion of the Scourge. After more than 10 years, only judges general greatly charged the other instead. He asked the ordinary jealous residents. It was jealousy which was the living. It was also a way to vent his dissatisfaction. There was no large number of refugees and civilians were originally lost to leave a large number of large amounts of magic power in his body. Stormwind corrosive void at that time. This caused the South Sea to have 300,000 soldiers and civilians must be protected and winning the worst way. And later, however, the diligence and still betrayed their then figure began to become learned title of traitor. The one that the trusted Relugia have turned this city. However, it was resurrected by the sun along the way, and not another soldier from Stormwind just 2 seconds. Complete, they had long heard of Duque's return into the air. This was the first time they saw Duque command the illusory giant showed an angry expression. The scout out the weird officers and the commanding officers' faces filled with surprise. Very undeterminedly lit down what they were doing. The canopy of the undead sky for one calamity army signature was a real demotion. From the void, however, that soul to take down city highest, which the damned Lord Martian began to reverberate with cheers like a dead dog. The allies of the Rotterdam Valentine's Day was also invented by George charged by ever since with a child his father Mary has no choice but to marry weighing on the hearts of Lord Darren. Is Lord Darren going to not every member of the Marquis family had the royal family going to him that exploded? We still have a fact that the core members had a right to wear instantly pulled out the middle ones who had grown up Princess Kalia and most of them had claimed that the recruits were orphans for magically appeared at the critical moment and comprehensive the smaller parts of the kingdom. Even though they were separated by the darkest number of unauthorized still used his powerful children to search a large number of young children dying by the roadside. When they found out that the directly by the giant the calamity on Darren to the 15 years many long road couldn't have killed his comrades in Dallas, and William looked in as disciple by Duke he secretly clenched his soldiers and told himself that he would regard the great hero like over and in the next second he would become the one with face throughout the entire sentence cheering raising his weapons behind no shadow everyone was clapped turned around and smiled. They would have all been the silver shield soldiers shrieked their shields so don't worry now you can swear too making a loud sound that found that he could surrounded by the Euphrates racial features clearly could only rely on the help of and even then personal guards to open the way to enter William surprisingly stood at attention. It was natural that old friends to begin after a long time. Perhaps unlike Joe raised his shield and charged his time side down and behind, but there was no doubt that in this case returned. He was still the other to the red-haired maid who had engaged barrel-like torso while running a high-speed military fortress like planted heavily on the battlefield nights immediately led in by these two slender yet incompetent apparently discussed the holy light and a virgin saying that the virgin saying as perhaps they had lost their sound like a due to the hail. His eye down did not have a courage to stand and shiny had a strange expression. He really wanted to look at Kalia and Lucia's height of fleshy tentacles with stone-like skin. But the most handsome Lothar on path would not survive the passage of time. Nor would it be redemption who used his momentarily in a bad way what they were feeling with moments swirled around the Mediterranean sea of unjustice body finally entered this world. As soon as he wanted the descendant of the damaged eyes was dazzled by the light. Unfortunately, forgive me for being only harassing so high for humor. Among the first and generations all night about to hug him. Other than you, there was no most racially tense nouns. The 70% of the earth, the remaining 6 first generations however all over the face that there weren't many people who could play as well as someone else had done that. They would have been reprimanded long ago. Arcane missile who asked him to the onlookers felt as if they had seen a falling comet, and Duke had come out of retirement too early. Arthas felt that his bones shot tearing apart, and it was some kind of auditory generation as King Lang and Anduin, he saw the pillars that kept shaking surrounding strange expressions on their faces that started to correct. It was as if they wanted to realize that it was not the limit of what morning star paused for a second. The Lich's countenance changed on didn't want to admit it. The spiritual light flickering in his toga in front of him seemed to waver, even if it was not a clinch move in wrestling. Even if the morning star everyone seemed to be able to hear the crisp snap unconsciously bent down. Even if it was filled with intense shame and anger, was enough for him to ignore the falling down. Archaron's way that was the case. And however, in the next moment out of an something that shocked him so much that his jaw almost fell off at the fact that Duke deliberately magic hands appeared next to the 5 as hilarious as it had been more than 10 years ago. 8 arcane missiles all had a smile on their faces. If his calculations weren't wrong, speaking of which, these 8 arcane missiles incomparably harmonious your mighty power could allow them to praise your mighty power. Definitely not on the level of a morning star. Forcefully even after Duke's return, in the next moment, he had not returned to our normal city even long before today. Make up for the mistakes we have made. One steadfastly supported Duke and cooperated with Duke's actions. Forget it. Ronan was finally 50% of my power, which is already much better than the worst scenario I had imagined. He was not an ordinary radiant moon either. Damn it. The arcane spell radiating from his body flickered like a light and be happy. 47. In the snow-covered battlefield years made almost every inch of the snow reflected Ronan's strength of radiance. Anduin's face was full of sorrow. In this era of material severe punishment, people who could live past 60 years old would consider to have lived and did not pay much attention. Those were isolated cases. After all, better than lives they were advanced and battle, they were still stable auras. The sudden increase in mana was not something that had temporarily expanded magic circuit to break them. Why do you still look like you were 18 did not have 10 years old? Too huge not to stuck out his tongue. Do I have to tell them that the red dragon queen has granted me immortality now? It's enough. Anduin did not mind. Even more magic hands well, when I first met you. If he had often said that I looked like a young man last 20 looked like a purplish now, it's your younger generation many world of the empty space were suddenly sucked into the ground and number of missiles in the cracks caused by the rupture of the level of an arcane barrage. Archimonde was venting his joy terrifying attack that was not in the midst of his torrential rain. The evil greedy side began to spread out, and ordinary people could not even find a noble lady to marry. Throwing a Christmas tree made a highly concentrated arcane magic power and officially rejected Jaina, as if trying to avoid touching the ground and flashed more than 100 meters away. His head slightly in the city of tree would accelerate under Ronan's control. Had already spread like wildfire. Those towers were the marquee of the Stormwind time of the day. Who actually controlled the entire south city state. A huge lady magnificent more than 40 meters also had hopes of establishing he was immersed in his memory. It was not an exaggeration to say that there was a huge sound 3 queens at the tallest and most beautiful tower in the city suddenly this might have been a war. That was Antonida's mage tower. The Calamity army was invading, as a great lich who joined in that direction. His mage tower was allowed to be preserved, at most, but as Antonida's soul was destroyed to escape from the marriage, this mage tower would protect ownerless object. However, Business was more important like its master. Yes, it could not escape the fate of destruction. Earlier today, at this moment, there was a violent tremor in the slowly but inevitably tumbling down. The palace mages of Stormwind and the whole tower that there might be a powerful invisible descending. One had to know that this was not Archimonde's deliberate attack. Yes. The commander of the burning wave caused by the ripples of his power. He has just descended in the quickly collapsed and turned into dust. Heading west. The sound of destruction rumbled in the endless sea from the South Flow coast, causing him to be near the border of Gilness. But he didn't dare to raise his head. His target is most likely the Well of Eternity at Mount Hyjal single-handedly destroy Silver Moon City. With that, however, he had played the footage he had recorded from Antonida's Mage Tower. He had only taken down the Dalagin with the attacks of Breaking Dawn mages were ineffective against Archimonde. The scene in front of him, the entire audience gasped in astonishment. A combat power that could easily destroy a city single-handedly. If he hadn't destroyed Silver Moon City and revived Kel in the face of a super demon, it would have been a complete failure. Because in the end, he didn't even face the Alliance army led by Xueqi. But now, should they be glad that Archimonde did not directly cause trouble for the Alliance after descending? And he didn't even need to be there personally. The final countdown before the real apocalypse was simply too great. Under the conference table, Elugia, who was sitting on Xueqi's left as maniacal laughter, secretly extended her small scourge army was also finished. Xueqi did not 500 refuse, death knights, and also used his left hand to secretly grasp Elugia's elite and skeleton warriors. And women were sensitive, and in times like this, they especially needed comfort. Only God knew how many would be left in the end. Held her hand. This scene which made Elugia feel at ease and relieved, but he didn't dare to show it. She could not help but shout in her heart, "As long as you're happy, Xueqi did not forget me." Xueqi did not forget scores after the fall. Xueqi did not forget making people feel like they were better off dead than sitting opposite. Archimonde was the other sensitive. He was completely single-minded, and as long as he ignored it on the spot, then it would be fine. She could faintly feel just as Archimonde was laughing wildly. There was a small interlude. However, Antonida's Mage Tower, which was supposed to be in a state of destruction, lips and pretend that she did triggered some kind of defense mechanism. Back to the topic at hand. Attacked on its own. William was truly fearless. The bright arcane light attracted the attention of most of the strong people in the city almost immediately. Lightning, Xueqi said in a deep voice. The lightning that split the sky was so sudden that many of the strong people only managed to react, but I still want to cast a defensive spell on themselves before the attack arrived. Also, if you want to fight against Archimonde, your body might not be able to support you. But the demon commander Archimonde. Wait a moment. Archimonde's response caused out of the conference room the Zed's eyes to widen. His response was no response at all. That was an all-out attack that gathered an unknown amount of Breaking Dawn Mage Tower's mana. Under William's excited gaze, didn't dare to take that terrifying amount of mana head-on. Golden light. However, after the huge explosion, that holy aura seemed to be substantial and didn't seem to be affected at all. Towards them like layers of waves. Damage. Looking at it, even a black mark on his abdominal muscles that had been hit 13 years ago. Although he knew that low-level mysterious power would definitely be dispelled by top-level mysterious power. However, the difference was so huge that it was simply unimaginable. He just felt that this sword seemed to be a little narrow. If it was kill Jaden, perhaps there would be chaos. The sword and he would want to chase after the possible culprit, but after it broke back, or perhaps tear down the Mage Tower 3 more times. Put back together no matter what. The arrogant Archimonde didn't care at all. Instead, he turned his one-handed sword that was also emitting a holy radiance. The dread Lord Tichondrius figure suddenly appeared in a black fog. He knelt down on one knee and saluted Archimonde. The system genie scanned it, sir, and the general situation appeared. Jaden said that this was the translated version of the information that Xueqi was familiar with. With that, unknown holy sword bound after Earthies and Earthies another glance. 90-155 he seemed to sense his target, speed and then began to take huge strides towards his target. Level. If he didn't guess wrong, low-level, Archimonde's target should be the world tree on Mount Hyjal. Non-evil alignment is estimated that the attributes of the equipped user will be Well of Eternity next to the world tree could attract the attention of a super great agility like him. Increases the critical hit rate of your physical attacks by 36. Equip. Increases the critical hit rate by 50. Equip. Increases the attack strength by 108. Equip. Possibility of hitting. Shoots a holy arrow at the target, dealing 308 to 412 points of holy damage and an additional 100 points of holy damage within 10 seconds. Equip. Deals 10 points of holy damage to enemies who attack you with melee weapons. Looking at this long and sharp sword, almost like a piercing sword, the incomparably dazzling holy sword, Duke's testicles were faintly aching. Fate seemed to be playing a huge joke on him. A divine weapon that had never appeared in the original history was right in front of him. Its gorgeous attributes and special effects were definitely superior to all epic weapons in this era. It might even be superior to other divine weapons by several streets. 99% of its attributes were flawless. If it was taken out, most melee professionals in the world would go crazy for it. It was a pain in the ass because the equipment requirement was for a Breaking Dawn mage. What the hell is this? A melee weapon for Breaking Dawn mages? It was true that mages could use one-handed swords. Before transmigrating, Xueqi had teased his mage friends in the game. Damn it, if you can't fight, can't you just rush up and kill the boss with your staff? However, this holy sword, which was clearly meant for thieves who used swords, was actually limited to Breaking Dawn mages. Wasn't this asking Xueqi to stab Archimonde with the sword? Such a small sword for Archimonde to use as a toothpick? What kind of divine weapon is this? Xueqi, who was used to safely hiding behind and casting magic, was shocked when he found out that this meant he had to fight at close range. Anduin also knew how unreliable this sword was. He could only shrug and say helplessly, "I don't know what happened either. After the sword broke, I went to find Magni to reforge it." In the end, he still insisted that this was the guidance of fate. The guidance of fate? Fate my ass. If I didn't change your fate, you, Noxus, would have been dead 13 years ago. Lothar continued, "If it was someone else, I would think that Magni was crazy. But if it's you, I think this might be a special opportunity. Come to think of it, your talent in close combat isn't bad. After all, you stabbed Sargeras and beat up Deathwing." Xueqi couldn't hear what Lothar said after that. Because he was already in a mess in the wind. Xueqi wasn't afraid of death because he could resurrect. Xueqi had always tried his best to stay as far away from those who played with dark magic and plundered souls. One had to know that even though Archimonde looked like a maniac in melee combat, he was actually more skilled at magic than most mages. He could still remember Archimonde's finger of death. This unreasonable dark magic was definitely powerful enough to destroy the heavens, the earth, and the air. If he was hit by it, Xueqi's soul would fall in minutes. Even the angel sister, who could only be seen after death, couldn't save Xueqi. This time if he died he would die. In the past, Xueqi had the fearless image of a mage who wrote novels and a warrior. Ah, aren't you a legendary hero? Aren't you the dragon slayer Xueqi? You even dared to fight Sargeras. Why don't you dare to fight Sargeras's underling? When Xueqi rose higher and higher with all kinds of achievements, people would unknowingly have higher expectations of him. It was like a ruffian who became a hero, and people would praise him loudly. On the other hand, even if a hero slaughtered one evil dragon after another and saved countless people, people would only think of him when the next evil dragon appeared. For a moment, Xueqi almost wanted to abandon this burden. He had never been a true warrior. Even after transmigrating for so long and doing so many earth-shattering things, he was still an ordinary university student. He could be resurrected after losing his moral integrity, and he could sacrifice his courage at almost no cost. No one knew that because he was afraid of his soul being captured, Xueqi had been avoiding Ingang and other demon warlocks who were far more powerful than him. For example, he had never faced the demigod warlock Gul'dan even once. Moreover, this time, he was no longer facing an enemy of similar strength, but a demon commander who was far beyond his imagination. It wasn't just him. Even Elusia, who was secretly holding his hand, grabbed his hand instead. She was clearly saying, "Don't go, that's the demon commander. Only a demigod should deal with him." However, Xueqi still held out his hand. It wasn't the left hand that Elusia was pressing down on. It was the right hand. He used his right hand to grasp the hilt of the unknown long sword. There was a bitter smile on his face. "I came for insurance. I just didn't expect this insurance to be myself." Anduin took a deep breath. "You're hesitating." "Yes." Unexpectedly, Xueqi didn't deny it. "I thought you were a fearless and gutsy non-human monster." Xueqi was silent. However, Anduin walked over and patted Duke's shoulder under William's expectant and slightly disappointed gaze. He didn't face Duke but spoke to William instead. "Don't worry, Anduin." "William, did you see that? A true hero isn't a fearless madman. Even the great hero in your eyes, Duke Marcus, would still be afraid, worried and hesitant. This is normal, because only those who act like that are real people." Not only William, but even Duke's face was filled with astonishment. Anduin continued, "This is a crisis of the world. Who wouldn't be afraid when facing such an opponent? However, among 10,000 people, there would always be one or two who would stand up for various reasons. Maybe it's for honor, or maybe it's because of responsibility, or some other messy reasons. But these are not important.
As long as one makes the crucial choice at that crucial moment, regardless of whether he succeeds or not, he is already a hero at that moment.
Xueqi was stunned. William took a deep breath. Uncle Anduin, were you afraid when you went to Karazhan back then? Of course. I was afraid too, but I had to go because I had your father and you behind me, the kingdom, and millions of Stormwind people. And Medivh was one of my few childhood friends. So, I had to go. It's not an exaggeration to say that I became a hero because of my responsibility. Chapter 852. At the age of 22, Varian was at his most hot-blooded. He longed to make a name for himself, and to one day become a hero on par with Uncle Anduin, whom he admired the most. It wasn't that he didn't like Xueqi, but that Xueqi was a mage after all, and they weren't on the same path. Anduin's words were a good wake-up call for Varian. He humbly lowered his head and bowed to Anduin. At this moment, Kalia, who had been silent all this while, spoke. Even though she had matured a lot, she still had the unique voice of a young girl. Xueqi, is there anything else that Rotterdam can do for the Alliance? Xueqi tapped the table lightly with his left index finger. If the unrecognizable course of history hadn't changed, then in less than 3 months, once Archimonde knelt down, the power that the Burning Legion transmitted to Azeroth would immediately weaken. By then, Lich King Nazul would lose half of his strength. Logically speaking, waiting until then to counterattack was the most ideal. But doing so was a little too passive. First of all, this was on the premise that Archimonde had to kneel. If Archimonde was too powerful in this life, and really destroyed Mount Hyjal, settled the Well of Eternity, and destroyed the World Tree, that would really be the end of everyone. Secondly, the Alliance had preserved more vitality than in history. At least 2/3 of Rotterdam's elite army was preserved, which gave the Alliance more confidence. There would no longer be the Scarlet Crusade, which was cursed like a dog, and the slightly bitter Silver Dawn, which was praised by tens of thousands of people. Moreover, Kalia had become the queen. It would be too much of a waste if she was simply placed in the palace as a mascot. Just as Xueqi was thinking about it, he suddenly received a new message. It was a magical image sent by a mage apprentice who had sacrificed himself. In the image, Archimonde's huge body swept across the fragile Rotterdam continent all the way to the west. In the lands invaded by the Calamity Army, only all living things died, and everything withered. At least the land was still the land, and the forest was still the forest. The places that Archimonde passed through were all easily burned by the flames that flowed out of his body. The ground was sinking, and everything that could be burned was turned into ashes. Perhaps this was why they were called the Burning Legion and not the Devil Legion. In his heart, Xueqi cursed fiercely. Damn it, since this guy can teleport here, why can't he teleport directly to Kalimdor? Although he was cursing, Xueqi still asked the officer who had sent the message in detail.
The news he got was that Archimonde had already gone to the vicinity of Orson Farm in the Silver Pine Forest in the west of the Lordaeron continent.
It is estimated that the gigantic demon will arrive at the South Stream coast by late tomorrow, the messenger reported.
Xueqi pondered for a moment and gave his first order.
Tell Dolan to clear the sea route. Don't come into contact with the Arch-Herons. Turning his head, Xueqi looked at Queen Kalia, who looked hopeful and eager for a quest. Please inform Mograine. Have Abendis and Turalian push the front lines back to the Sodoril River, then have Dathrahan and Mograine personally lead the attack on Caer Darrow. Caer Darren? Elucia trembled. She could never forget that place. After all, she had lived in Caer Darren for her entire childhood. Unfortunately, Elucia, that place has become the biggest base for the Church of the Damned. The Scourge Army calls it Scholomance. The Dark Dean, Jaden, has been continuously training dark acolytes and necromancers there. Destroying that place is equivalent to cutting off an important source of manpower for the Scourge Army. Anduin snapped his fingers. He seemed a little happy. Not a bad idea. Also, that place is near the front lines. But don't they have 2 Breaking Dawn Great Liches? Shouldn't we? Xueqi shook his head. You don't know those 2 Great Liches well enough. A Nastrian isn't the kind of guy who is willing to follow orders and be a dog. Kel Thuzad doesn't like to fight head-on. Before all his subordinates die, he won't fight. But just in case, I can ask Krasis to help attack Caer Darren. If anything happens, He can still hold on until I teleport over. Kalia smiled. Then I have no problem. What about us? William was a little excited. Call Magni. We'll go to the Dalajan and have an armed patrol. William immediately became dispirited. He wasn't lacking in intelligence. He immediately understood what this meant. Archimonde had roared in the Dalajan and turned the Dalajan into ruins. It was conceivable that Arthas would evacuate the Dalajan. Now that the Scourge army was powerful, attacking Rotterdam would provoke Arthas to retaliate fiercely.
Any commander with a clear mind would know that it was impossible to take down the Scourge army in one go.
The best way was to plan slowly. Hence, attacking the Dalajan was more of a political gesture. Just like a few days ago, Lothar had recovered the earthy highlands and rapid water castle, which had almost no organized undead army. On the surface, it was said that they had recovered a lot of territory, but in reality, it was just a piece of empty land. Except for the most determined people in Rapid Water Castle, no one would be willing to continue to stay there.
In fact, in the past week, more than 100,000 Gilnis and Storm Guardians had responded to Jaina's call and boarded the ship or were preparing to board the ship to go to the paradise in their hearts, Theramore, which was on the other side of the endless ocean.
After a long discussion, they finally decided on the missions of each legion.
After the meeting, Lothar found Xueqi in private, and told him a piece of news that wasn't surprising to Xueqi.
If we have to go to battle against Archimonde this time, I won't be able to go. I plan to give Quell Zerum to Tyraean. Ando in your body. Lothar smiled bitterly. I got injured when I was young. I only realized that it was terrible after I was 60 years old. My bones and muscles hurt all the time. Lothar took off his coat and pointed at the various scars on his body. Xueqi noticed that several of the scars were left from the battle with Orgrim. Thinking about how Lothar had once again led the army to battle despite his illness, Xueqi couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. Then, as a warrior, dying on the battlefield is the best ending.
However, if I want to weaken the hope of the Alliance and all the intelligent species in the world to win, then I'd rather give up my divine sword and let the stronger younger generation gamble on the future of humanity.
I've already decided on this matter. Don't try to persuade me. You should know Tyraean well. He's a good guy. Indeed. I'll leave it to you this time. I hope you can have good news. If you fail, don't worry, I'll be there. Even if I have to carry a broken sword, I'll go and fight Archimonde.
Lothar was clearly saying those words in a relaxed manner, but Xueqi could deeply feel that Lothar was full of helplessness and sensed that he was past his prime.
Xueqi's chest tightened. Not only did he feel respect for Lothar, but he also felt extremely regretful. Veterans don't die, they just wither. Chapter 853. There was hesitation, and the thought of retreating. Compared to a true hero like Lothar, Xueqi felt ashamed. His title as a legendary hero was more like a blasphemy to the word hero. It had nothing to do with past achievements, but purely the difference in ideology. Xueqi summoned his courage and said, Yes, Andoin, actually, you might also know that the longevity of the High Elves and their original ancestors, the Night Elves, actually comes from the blessings of the dragons. To be precise, it comes from the blessings of Nosdorm. Lothar narrowed his eyes, seemingly having already guessed what Xueqi was going to say. Before Xueqi could say it, he waved his hand gently to stop Xueqi. Perhaps living beings will instinctively pursue the so-called longevity, immortality, and even eternal life. However, I don't think that too long of a time is a good thing for a living being. Look at the High Elves. Even if they don't have an infinite lifespan, what have they done in the past thousands of years?
They have fallen and corrupted because of emptiness, and imprisoned the thoughts of themselves and their compatriots because of their lack of progress. In the past 7,000 years, has the entire Quell Salis kingdom ever improved at all?
Lothar's words made sense, and Xueqi was speechless. It is precisely because of the shortness of human life that we cherish it. Humans will seize the most glorious years of their lives to invent, create, and do all kinds of valuable things. Look, when I was young, the entire world only knew about swords and magic. Lothar then pointed his finger at Xueqi's eyebrows.
However, the hot weapons and steam civilization that you promoted have overturned the lives of the people of Stormwind in the past 13 years.
If it weren't for the existence of transcendent professionals, and if it weren't for the fact that cannons couldn't destroy the undying and demons, There would be no need for long swords and holy light to exist at all. Think about it. Isn't this a miracle created by humans?
Duque's breathing quickened all of a sudden. He waited, eager to hear Lothar's last words. Indeed, Anduin Lothar, the name with a sacred meaning, and the greatest words left by the greatest man of this era, did not disappoint Duque. That is to say, life is great because it's short, life is glorious because it's limited. Duque was shocked to the point of being unable to control himself, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. Duque suddenly understood why Lothar would choose not to marry, and would rather let the noble and great Arthi bloodline end in his generation. Noxus believed that there was no need for Thoradin the Great's bloodline to continue existing after a more inclusive and greater alliance.
Suddenly, he felt like crying. But he couldn't cry. Lothar left, leaving Duque alone in the wind, gazing into the distance. As the night deepened, Ilusia came to Duque's side. It's getting late. Get some rest. If the soldiers below see you in such a melancholic state, they will start to doubt their future. Yes. In the past 10 years, in order to avoid agitating the Rotterdam kingdom, the Barov family had never sent any of their members to take up important positions in Southsea Castle. However, as the former lord of Southsea Town, the Barov family's influence was everywhere, and they were the de facto masters of Southsea city-state. Hence, the Barov family owned an independent villa on the hill to the west of Southsea Castle. Following Ilusia to the so-called resting place, Duque was stunned to discover that the style of the villa was completely modeled after the villa on the side of the Wind Lake that he often stayed in. It was not just the exterior, but even the things inside were arranged exactly the same, except for those that were too precious to be replicated. The master bedroom was arranged according to Duque's bedroom in Karazhan. Clearly, that was not something that could be done overnight. More importantly, many of the things in the villa were obviously Windrunner style, which was left behind by the two female owners of the Wind Lake villa. In fact, she had even discovered and imitated many small details. If Ilusia was a jealous or narrow-minded woman, she would never do such a thing. What was effort? That was effort. Duque suddenly sighed. Ilusia was too good to him.
In the 10 years that he had been missing, Ilusia had supported the entire Marcus family without complaint or regret, ensuring that his policies and plans could continue to be implemented, and even providing for all the expenses that his so-called fiancée Gianna had. When he had just returned, when his magic circuit was in a mess, she did not hesitate to split her soul and offer up her magic circuit to help him through the difficult times. When he rushed to the Dalajan to besiege Arthas for the first time, Ilusia endured the pain in her soul and rushed back to Stormwind City to organize the logistics of the army. This young lady of the Barov family, who had almost been completely ruined, had silently shouldered so much with her feminine body and weak shoulders. However, she had never been jealous of Aurelia and Sasha. She put herself in a low position and did all this silently.
Ilusia?
Ilusia, who had been tugging at the hem of her skirt nervously, not knowing if Duque liked her, was stunned for a moment before coming back to her senses.
While I'm back, I'll first fix your magic circuit.
No,
Your battle is imminent, you need more. Obviously, Ilusia had misunderstood.
Duque did not say anything, but only deeply pressed his lips on hers.
The woman's uneasy heart suddenly calmed down. Duque smiled. Don't you think that if you get your magic circuit back, it will be more convenient for you to open the portal to find me? Ilusia's face instantly turned red. From her cheeks to her neck, to her collarbone, to her half-exposed peaks, she was all bright red. Actually, I didn't mean to drag you down today. But when I think that I haven't really had you, and that I might lose you soon, I suddenly feel very scared. Duque breathed into Ilusia's sensitive ear. Today, in addition to fixing your magic circuit, I will also help teach you alchemy. Alchemy? When did Duque learn this thing? Or did Duque learn it in the past 10 years in Karazhan? Duque added in a low voice, it's the most mysterious human alchemy in the world. What? The human body was very mysterious. It consisted of 45% to 75% water, about 8% blood, 35% to 40% bones, and a certain amount of protein, fat, and muscle. The specific method was to first purify the parent body, usually just washing it clean, and then draw a magic circle with your finger. Usually, you would focus on the important parts, and wait for the parent body to warm up. The last step was the most important step, pulling out the long sword needed to summon life, stabbing it into the center of the magic circle, repeatedly stabbing straight, stabbing left and right, and stabbing back until the blade burst with the light of life. There was a chance to complete human alchemy in 10 months. Chapter 854. The moonlight was bright, and the beauty was as beautiful as water. As if afraid that her beloved pillow would run away, Alucia hugged Duque tightly and refused to let go. The beauty was exhausted. Duque had been holding back for too long and had gone overboard on a whim, tormenting her greatly. However, Alucia was like a moth flying into a flame, fearless of her own safety, and welcomed him with all her might. When Duque came back to his senses, he realized that this was a combo that Aurelia and Reisa together might not be able to withstand. Would there be any deaths? Would it kill someone? The above two sentences should be understood from two different perspectives. Chinese is a wonderful language. Sensing that Duque moved, Alucia trembled like a frightened rabbit. She struggled to open her tired eyes and said almost subconsciously, "Duque, don't go." Duque was speechless. He gently stroked Alucia's head and said softly, "I won't go, I won't go." Only then did Alucia wake up. She raised her head, and there were still faint traces of tears in the corner of her eyes. Duque suddenly felt heartache and wiped away her tears with the softest of movements. "I'm sorry, I hurt you." The black-haired beauty made a mellow nasal sound, and then smiled softly. "This pain is really nothing compared to the 13 years of waiting and mental torture. It's a pity that I can't give you my most beautiful 10 years. Women were like flowers, and Alucia's most dazzling and blooming age had just passed. Using her finger to gently draw meaningless symbols on Duque's trained abs, Alucia said faintly, "I'm not a jealous woman. As long as you can occasionally come and pamper me, I'm willing to die." Sigh. Where else could he find such a good woman? For a moment, Duque felt that starting a harem was a very immoral act. But after being together for so long, it would be a sin to leave anyone behind. Fine. He would get used to it after a while. However, Duque decided to give Alucia a gift. "Close your eyes." She had doubts, but she did not hesitate. She knelt there and propped herself up without any concealment, revealing her beauty. She then gently raised her head and closed her eyes, quietly waiting for Duque to make his move. She trusted Duque unreservedly. Even if Duque gave her a sharp knife to kill herself in the next moment, she was willing to accept it. However, what she got was a surge of heat that she had never experienced before. It was like a clear spring in the mountains in summer. At the same time, it was like the boundless growth of cheerful vitality in spring. She could clearly feel that the white hair that she had grown due to working overtime and staying up late had fallen off by itself. The dry and split ends of her hair had also disappeared without a trace. There was also her skin. Although she had always taken good care of it, how could the skin of a 28-year-old mature woman be comparable to that of an 18-year-old girl? But at this moment, she felt as if an endless source of life was nourishing every corner of her body. Every inch and every cell in his body was singing in joy. "Ah!" Alucia finally cried out involuntarily. She looked at her delicate palm in disbelief. Then, almost recklessly, she turned around and rushed to the only full-length mirror in the room. The next moment, she suddenly understood what Duque's gift was. It was something that almost all human women in the world secretly yearned for and had always been envious of the High Elves: eternal youth. If it was given to her by someone else, she would most likely think that it was some kind of magic or high-level scam. But the person who gave her the gift was Duque. The Duque who saved the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, was also her lover. Duque gently hugged Alucia and whispered intimately, "Isn't it just 10 years? If you want 100 years, 1,000 years, I can give it to you." Alucia was so excited that her tears were like a broken dam. She turned around and kissed Duque frantically. The second round of human alchemy had begun. The next morning, there was another military conference. William was dumbfounded to see that the two ladies who had participated in the military conference the day before had completely different reactions. Alucia was in high spirits. What was more exaggerated was that she seemed to be 10 years younger. In the past, William had felt that Alucia was a very obvious older sister. Why did he feel that she was the same age as his queen now? On the other hand, Queen Kalia. Her Majesty seemed to have not slept well the whole night. Even though she covered it with rouge and makeup, one could still see the obvious eye bags and dark circles under her eyes. Just as William was about to ask the queen if she had not slept well the night before, the old Anduin kicked him harshly under the table. On the contrary, the Bronzebeard brothers, who had just arrived with the new dwarf army today, looked confused. Then, Xueqi suddenly felt like strangling Magni's big mouth, because the dwarf king had made it clear from the start. Xueqi, what the hell are you doing now? How many queens have you offended? Let me tell you. If you cause a civil war in the alliance because of this, I won't save you. His words made Kalia so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. She and Xueqi were innocent. Theoretically. Xueqi was embarrassed. He decided to be an ostrich. I don't know anything. I really don't *king know anything. I don't care if you believe it or not. I believe it myself. Yes, the plan worked. In the following week, the Alliance's two armies advanced at the same time. It was not considered a joint attack, but it was actually challenging the Calamity Army's bottom line. Without any obstacles, the Alliance's southern army recovered the Dalajan ruins. Along the way, the number of wandering undead they encountered was only in the 4 digits, which had nothing to do with the Calamity troop. William went up excitedly and cleaned them up in a few moments. The boring victory made William lose interest. Uncle Xueqi, will the Scholomance Academy resist more fiercely? If I had known, I would have gone there to take a look. No, there won't be any fierce resistance there, Lothar said with certainty. Why? William continued to ask. Because the one in control of the Calamity Army is no longer the Lich King Zul. If I'm not wrong, when Archimonde descends, the control of the Calamity Army will fall into the hands of the Dreadlord tribe. Of course, they would want more of Nazul's loyal followers to be destroyed. The Scholomance Academy nurtured people from the Cursed Church, and the founder of the Cursed Church, Thuzad, was a loyal follower of Nazul and Arthas. The cunning Dreadlord was, of course, happy to see the Scholomance Academy kneel down. On the other side, the liches that had been transformed from high elves were also happy to see this scene. Wood Arthas and Thuzad, these two lone commanders, rushed to save the Scholomance Academy. Chapter 855. Caer Daren, the former base of the Barav family, was on the island in the middle of the lake. At this moment, the huge city gate seemed to be under unimaginable pressure, and it was creaking. Every nail, every huge wooden plank, and every piece of reinforced steel frame on the city gate that was wrapped in a thick layer of fine steel skin was trembling, as if it would fall apart at any moment. It was the Dark Dean of Scholomance, Gandling. His dark magic was exploding uncontrollably under the stimulation of the powerful holy light outside the door. He looked at the dark apprentices behind him with pity, and he tried to suppress the unstable structure of the space due to the powerful mysterious power. He reminded them with difficulty, "Run for your lives. Those who were killed by Ashbringer won't even have the chance to revive." Run. Where to? Within a radius of several kilometers, there were Griffin Knights in the sky, warships specially towed by steam tractors on the surface of the water, and Naga and Murloc troops that had been specially summoned to the bottom of the water. The one in charge was even the Murloc prophet Maugr, who had advanced to the Radiant Moon rank. The surrounding space was still completely sealed by the Dalajan mages led by Krasis with a magic array. Regardless of whether Anastrian would come or not, even if he did, no one would be able to save them if Duke entered the battlefield at any time. Unless the entire Scourge army came to rescue them. But was it possible? Not when the Dreadlord family controlled almost all the high-level undead. With the last tone of Gadon's words, there was finally an overwhelming sound of metal tearing and giant wood twisting and shattering at the huge city gate. The gate, which was more than 10 meters tall, collapsed. In the swirling dust, 2 burly figures emitting golden light appeared in front of the dark acolytes and necromancers, ignoring the interference of the dust. Die! Fallen ones! Mograine swung Ashbringer, which was as large as a door, and hundreds of evil souls within 100 meters let out shrill screams before they could even get close. Then, under the blazing platinum light, they were turned into ashes. Retreat? Where could they retreat to? Under normal circumstances, they would retreat to the depths of Scholomance and use traps and mechanisms to deal the most damage to the Alliance. Don't forget, history is very different. The Barav family, which had joined Scholomance in the past, had lost 2 unfilial sons, but the old duke was still living well in Elwyn Forest. Caer Darrow was a territory that the Barrow family had operated for centuries. What Gadden knew, the Barrow family knew. What Gadden didn't know, the Barrow family knew.
It was a tunnel of uncanny workmanship that connected the bottom of the lake to the island in the middle of the lake.
Furthermore, it had been enhanced by concealment magic, preventing detection from those below the Breaking Dawn realm. It had not been opened for over 30 years.
A super holy bomb made by the best dwarves and gnome craftsmen was secretly transported to the lowest level of scholomance. When the lake water mixed with holy light shot out from the ventilation holes of every room in the academy, the outcome of this battle was already decided.
Mograine slashed Ashbringer in the air, and the golden sword light that seemed to be able to extend endlessly hit Dean Gadden's black magic shield like lightning, exploding into sparks all over the sky. This was the result of Gadden using lightning, and dodging most of the power of Ashbringer. If he had been hit directly, he would probably have been killed instantly. The surrounding space became more and more viscous, and even a powerhouse of Gadden's level could only flash to a mere 20 meters away. Usually, a flash was at least 100 or 200 meters away.
Gadden groaned in pain and directly abandoned the magic shield on his body that had been corroded by the holy light. He tumbled down from the air and rolled a few times on the ground under the effect of the momentum before he stabilized himself. However, just as he summoned a new void demon and tried to sacrifice this demon to become his magic shield again, another ball of holy light brushed past his fingertips and hit his summoned demon. That was Saidan Dathrahan's Hammer of Wrath. The hammer made of golden holy light smashed the void demon into pieces. It was too late for Gadden to anti-summon it. The sharp pain from the soul connection told Gadden that this void demon was finished, and its existence had been completely erased from the entire universe by the holy light. The scorching air current with the shock wave of the explosion blew Dean Gadden, who had just gotten up from the ground, several somersaults. He crossed the potholed battlefield and finally crashed into the blacksmith shop where the undead blacksmith was working just a moment ago. Gadden's old bones were stopped by an incomparably heavy iron felt. He knocked over a red-hot iron ingot on the iron felt, and the high-temperature red iron ingot imprinted on his shoulder, making a sizzling sound that was unknown whether it was roasted meat or bones. For an undead who had been resurrected twice, physical injuries were not important. What was really tragic was the subsequent blow. The brilliant brilliance of Ashbringer broke Gadden in half at the waist. Not only in the physical sense but also on the soul level. His soul, which was originally full and complete, was suddenly left with only half of it. Ah! Gadden let out a shrill scream. When he struggled on the ground with his bloodless upper body, 2 holy knights stood in front of him. Do you want to repent? A degenerate who pushed his friends and family into hell. Saidan's face was full of ridicule. His Majesty the Lich King.
Gadden opened his arms, trying to make one last fanatical shout with his remaining soul. Who would have thought that before he could finish, the huge Ashbringer had already chopped him into pieces like a mountain-splitting axe.
The evil body finally turned into ashes and dissipated in the air.
Saidan rolled her eyes. I thought you would let him finish shouting before killing him. What did Xueqi say again? The sad cry of a dog can be quite interesting sometimes. Ignoring Saidan's frivolity, Mograine waved his hand, and a large number of holy knights rushed in to wipe out the remaining enemies in Scholomance. At this time, he turned his head to look at Saidan Dathrahan. Saidan, I have seen too many disgusting undead who escape at the last moment. That's why I won't relax until I completely destroy them. You also have to be careful.
Even if it is you, if you are careless, you may end up like Antonidas and have your body taken over, ending up with a ruined reputation.
Ever since the holy knights decided to walk on the path of holy light, they have never been afraid of death, but we must die for something. A shiver came from the soul, and it made Saidan shiver. Perhaps it was because she sensed the tragic fate in her original history, or maybe it was some strange sixth sense. This time, Saidan really listened to him. At the same time, Xueqi, who had conquered the Dalajan ruins, found Antonida's last gift. Chapter 856. With a hint, it was not too difficult to find. Without a hint, even 10,000 elite rangers and bandits who were good at searching would not be able to find it. Only the heavens knew why mages hid things so well.
Looking at the Dalajan ruins that had been reduced to rubble, and even the average elevation of the ground had been plowed down by a few meters by Archimonde's mana, Xueqi felt a little uneasy. Because what Antonidas wanted him to find were 3 sewer pipes that were 200 meters east of his mage tower.
They looked no different from the other sewer pipes in the Dalajan. When Xueqi used the incantation left behind by Antonidas and cast a small spell on his eyes, his entire vision changed. He could not help but admire the amazing thoughts and imagination of the Dalajan mages. This little method was very simple. It was to use an elemental barrier spell to construct a small lens in front of the eyes to filter out certain elements. At this moment, it was filtering out all the frost elements, 2/3 of the fire elements, and 1/4 of the arcane elements. What appeared in front of Xueqi were 3 large arrowheads. Obviously, the focus of the 3 arrowheads was the treasure buried deep under the Dalajan ruins. It was an underground treasure vault that was 168 meters underground and covered by a layer of rock with a magical array. First of all, this depth was already insane. Secondly, it did not matter if it was dug out by the dwarves who were good at digging holes. The treasure vault had a perfect self-destruction function. Forcefully opening the treasure vault would only result in a floor full of debris. Xueqi, accompanied by Alusia who had recovered as a radiant moon mage, as well as Anduin, William, and the Bronzebeard brothers, sighed deeply, and used a unique spell to activate the few remaining sewer pipes. Brian found that he could see through the ground and see the water pipes that were buried underground. The pipes were so bright that he could even see the surface of the ground, and they extended all the way underground. Brian was dumbfounded. What the hell? Brother, it's a pity that Muradin is not here anymore. If he was, he would definitely nag us for at least 10 years for missing out on this. Magni knocked his hammer lightly on Bulang's head. Fool! We don't have to keep it a secret. His spirit in heaven will see it.
Xueqi didn't dare to speak at all.
Was he supposed to tell Magni, I purposely didn't tell you that your brother is still alive so that you can turn your grief into strength so that you can focus on creating Ashbringer?
Xueqi, who was a little conflicted, decided to find a chance to confess later. All right, I'll send my doppelganger down first.
Wait. Generally speaking, a Dalajan treasury like this is completely isolated from magical communication. Even if it's an avatar, how would it be able to send a message back? Xueqi smiled mysteriously. I have my own plan. Duke snapped his fingers, and a doppelganger that looked exactly like him appeared in front of everyone. Even its movements were vivid and lifelike. Magni's mouth gaped open. What the hell? Are all magicians this good at magic tricks?
Bulang echoed. That's right, that's right.
Almost at the same time, the 2 Xueqis spoke. Xueqi's doppelganger, who was walking towards the magic array that appeared, smiled. If other Breaking Dawn mages hear this, they might beat you up.
The real Xueqi shrugged.
Fortunately, you're my brother. I don't care if my magic is said to be the magic of wandering mages. The 2 dwarves' jaws dropped, and they couldn't close for a long time. Apart from the 2 dwarves, William was also shocked speechless. He turned his head and looked at Lothar with his young face. Uncle Anduin, are all Breaking Dawn mages so powerful? What should I do if I really have to fight a Breaking Dawn mage?
Anduin touched the back of his head, only to realize that there were no hairlines on his forehead.
He sighed awkwardly. No, regardless of whether he's a Breaking Dawn mage or not, it seems that Xueqi is the only one as perverted as Xueqi. As for fighting a Breaking Dawn mage, unless he has the skills of a pioneer warrior, there's no way he can fight now.
Who knew that even Alusia was muttering softly, if Duke really had that many, we wouldn't have to fight so hard.
Xueqi was speechless. He really didn't know if Alusia said that for him, or if she was just expressing her feelings. Antonida's magical defense array was very complete, and all types of magic were isolated. Once the doppelganger entered, not a single magic message could be sent out. Even so, Xueqi had a solution. After a while, a short and long knocking sound came from the depths of the earth. Of course, ordinary people wouldn't be able to sense such a weak vibration, but the system elf could. A simple Morse code would solve the problem. Short, this is S. Short, long is A. Short, long, yes is F. Short is E. Safe. Xueqi said in a language that the others couldn't understand, causing them to be stunned. It was still Magni who was the most sensitive. He suddenly raised his hand and shouted, Wait, Your doppelganger uses knocking to send signals? Is it Morse code? Of course, Xueqi answered instinctively. Magni immediately took out a loudspeaker and placed it on the ground, pressing it to his ear. He even made a shoo gesture for everyone to be quiet. His third brother did the same. The two respectable dwarves huddled on the ground, listening to the weak sounds coming from the depths of the earth. It had to be said that when it came to digging underground, dwarves were first-rate experts. There's really a sound, although it's very weak. Magni was the first to shout. Heavens! Why didn't we think of this before? Metal conducts sound better than metal. In the future, we can rely on knocking on the rails to send the signals we set. The magical Bulang understood by analogy. We don't have to be exploited by those greedy human magicians anymore. Last time, that bastard said that my spies told me that my precious daughter was hanging out with a charcoal-like dwarf. He even dared to charge me 500 gold coins for this information. I only found out later that my spy didn't send such a message at all. Magni was indignant. Xueqi looked constipated. In fact, he really wanted to tell Magni, your precious daughter is really like a charcoal-like dark iron dwarf, and it's King true love. Now, Xueqi didn't dare to complicate the issue. The alliance was already annoyed enough. He didn't want another battle between the Bronzebeards and the dark iron dwarves, at least not now. Ignoring the Bronzebeards, who were ecstatic because of the sudden discovery, Xueqi walked into the portal with Alucia. A halo covered both Xueqi and Alucia. After a feeling of descending like an elevator, Xueqi saw a small room. It was a room covered in frost. In the middle of the room, in a long round icicle, a beautiful sky blue staff was sealed. Chapter 857. The white staff had a psychedelic translucent feel to it. At the top of the staff was a round blue base. On the base was a white jade-like angel with both hands clasped together in a praying posture. It looked a little like white jade, but upon closer inspection, it looked like a silver-plated metal. It was a staff that should have been frozen in an ice pillar, but behind the angel statue were 12 blue arcane stars that were distributed in the shape of a clock, rotating slowly in a clockwise direction. It was exceptionally beautiful. Xueqi said casually, this should be a gift left behind by Antonidas. All women love to be beautiful. Alucia subconsciously cupped her face and exclaimed, wow! What a beautiful staff! It's a pity. This aura is only used by Breaking Dawn mages, isn't it? Xueqi smiled and gazed at Alucia. I'll use it for the time being. I'll give it to you when you reach Breaking Dawn? Alucia was stunned. Then, what are you going to use? I don't really like using staffs, unless it's a very powerful one. Otherwise, I won't bother using it. After saying that, Xueqi thought of something and added, actually, I still have the Atish, the legendary staff of the Guardian from Mediv. One day, I'll recast that divine staff. Hearing Xueqi's words, Alucia was relieved. Her eyes curved into 2 crescent moons as she smiled. It seems that even for this staff, I have to work hard to break through to Breaking Dawn. Xueqi rolled his eyes. Only a sorceress like Alucia, who had no desires on the path of mystery, would be able to put the cart before the horse to such an extent of training purely for the sake of a beautiful staff. All right, it's time to get down to business. Abala. Dumikat. Salon. Softly chanting the spell that Antonidas had given him, Xueqi extended his right hand forward as if he had touched the surface of a calm lake. Magic ripples spread in the air, and when the azure radiance spread throughout the vault, the piece of ice that had sealed the staff disappeared without a trace. It was as if the ice was just an illusion. Xueqi let go of Alucia's hand and stepped forward. He subconsciously reached out with his right hand, and then grabbed nothing. Like a proud kitten that refused to be touched by strangers, the blue and white staff spun in a small circle in the air, evading Xueqi's grasp. A cross-shaped vein appeared on Xueqi's forehead. This time, he reached out at an even faster speed, but missed again. This time, even Alucia, who was watching from the side, laughed out loud. What the hell? Xueqi was about to flip out when he suddenly received a prompt from the system elf. Dear host, it seems to want you to hold it with your left hand. Ha! Left hand? Xueqi listened to the system elf's prompt and stretched out his left hand this time. Suddenly, The proud kitten turned into a docile little kitten and landed on Xueqi's left palm. Almost as soon as he held the staff that was more than a meter long, incomparably complex and mysterious purple-blue arcane runes covered the entire body of the staff. Xueqi looked at it attentively, and suddenly a large list of prompts appeared on his retina. Frowny face Obsidian Queen. Bound after pickup. Unique. Secondary staff. Cannot equip another staff after equipping. 50-85 damage. Speed 3. 0. Attribute. Arcane level. Demigod requirement. Breaking Dawn Mage, owner of Arcane Throne, and Crown of Ice Magic Circuit. It is estimated that the attributes of the equipped user will be increased as follows. Plus 50 Endurance plus 88 Intelligence equip. Plus 20% Arcane Magic Damage equip. Plus 40% Arcane Magic Conversion Efficiency equip. Plus 20% Critical Strike Rating equip. Increase Magic Hit Rating by 32 equip. Increase magic hit rating by 32 as long as you are in a place connected to the arcane elemental world. Default plus 255 spirit. Equip. Automatically activates a magic shield by default. Can absorb up to 550 damage. Cooldown, 60 seconds equip. You have an additional arcane energy. Cooldown, 300 seconds. Does not conflict with the cooldown of the arcane circuit caused by the activation of arcane energy. After looking at the attributes of this strange secondary staff, Xueqi was dumbfounded. It was not that this staff was not impressive, but it was too impressive. Putting aside the harsh requirements that were almost exclusive to Antonidas, even though it was a demigod weapon, its attributes were even more impressive than many of the divine weapons in his impression. For example, the Atish legendary staff of the Guardian in Xueqi's impression. Its intelligence was just over 100. Xueqi really liked staff that directly increased percentage. This was many times better than staff that increased attributes. A life-saving magic shield that could be used once every 60 seconds was definitely a praise. That extra burst was a godly skill among godly skills. If he were to praise it, then Xueqi would like to give it 10,000 times. But, after equipping this staff, he could no longer use other staffs? This staff could actually increase spirit by 255 in most cases? What the hell was this? Spirit was a little useless for mages, but it was better than nothing. Spirit was an attribute that was generally used by priests and other healer professions, and the plus 40% arcane magic conversion efficiency always made Xueqi feel. Did I just take a wand-type magic battery? There were so many things that Xueqi wanted to complain about in his heart that it was almost comparable to the stars in the sky. In the end, Xueqi finally understood why Antonidas did not use this staff himself. On the table where the staff was originally stored, Xueqi found a handwritten book. On it was written Antonidas' diary, or rather, last words. Today, I finally got my body back, but I am no longer human, but a dirty great lich. I hate this state. Although I am old, I have never wanted to survive in this form. However, I have to hypnotize myself and tell myself that if I can continue to exist, I can do more magic and explore more mysteries. Otherwise, I will not be able to fool that bastard Nazul's soul search. I am going to Kuel Salas soon, but today the Dreadlord asked me for the Book of Mediv. I guess it should be to summon a super demon from the Burning Legion, perhaps kill Jaden or Archimond. I guess it is more of the latter. Fortunately, I have a copy, which gives me a chance to tamper with it. I used a part of my own soul to replace some key bytes. If I fall, this copy will naturally be damaged. Xueqi, I do not know if you will see this handwritten book. If you see it, I hope you can understand how powerless pure elemental damage is against a truly powerful demon. Just like how I was defeated by the Dreadlord. You need to highly concentrate your magic, otherwise you will not be able to harm these great demons. Perhaps my path is wrong, but at least there is hope. Chapter 858. The second half of the letter described a mage profession that Xueqi was both familiar and unfamiliar with. Xueqi looked at it and exclaimed, "Damn! Battle mage." This class-sounding profession evoked a memory that had been sealed away for a long time. Before he transmigrated, many players would remove the Azeroth. It was a time when Lordaeron had collapsed. The once glorious people of Lordaeron had formed the famous Scarlet Crusade. In the Scarlet Crusade dungeon, there was an area called the Scarlet Zone. The Scarlet Zone was not a popular dungeon and most players were not familiar with it, so it was common for the team to be wiped out. But the most terrifying elite monsters were even scarier than the bosses. They were the seemingly ordinary red-cloaked battle mages. When Xueqi first came, he thought it was just an ordinary monster that wielded two weapons. In its right hand was a seemingly powerful flaming sword and in its left hand was an ordinary staff. Ah! It sold swords and made staffs at the same time. Duke joked. Then, he was so amusing that he, a mage, dared to run over and start the fight. Well, there was always a price to pay for underestimating someone. Duke had forgotten that the famous mage in Lord of the Rings, Mr. Gon Tofu, who was also known as the Berserker Mage, was also a dual-wielding sword-wielding staff. One could imagine that a person with such an ability was no ordinary person. These elite pharaoh skills were quite strong. Their arcane explosion could push Xueqi back and attract more monsters. The shockwave from Morning dealt a lot of fire damage, and it also had a movement speed reduction effect. There was also the continuous damage spell Sacrifice. For a newbie mage like Xueqi who had good green equipment, he did not know that this spell could be dispelled. The result? He was defeated. Without a doubt, he was defeated. Xueqi used all of his skills, Flash, Ring of Frost, Icicle, and Wind Blast, but he couldn't even run back to the door and run out of the dungeon. He was brutally killed less than 10 steps away from the dungeon's door. Then, the second time, Xueqi did not believe it and was killed by the battle mage's staff and flaming sword. Only then did he realize how cruel this world was. Then there was no then. Step by step, the companions worked together to pull these small monsters out and torture them to death. Battle mages weren't a mainstream class in Azeroth, but they appeared repeatedly in major dungeons, torturing the players for a long time. Looking carefully, Battle Mage could actually have a part-time job. After thinking about it, Xueqi was speechless. Alright, this was the real world after all. There weren't as many rules and regulations as in the game. Just like the first generation of Holy Knights back in the day, they were all either priests or warriors. In fact, they didn't forget their own profession's skills. In a sense, this was considered a part-time job. Xueqi pondered for a moment and smiled. This is... Antonidas actually asked me to take on the role of a battle mage? What was this? Alright. This can barely be considered a path. However, now that he had a secondary weapon, what about the main weapon? Mainstream staffs were all two-handed weapons. This weird secondary staff was troublesome enough, and Xueqi did not have a good one-handed weapon. So, Xueqi casually took the only one-handed weapon he had with his right hand. Yes. It was the unknown one-handed weapon that Lothar had given him. The next moment, Xueqi felt that fate was playing a joke on him. This. Looking at the holy sword that shone with a golden light and its attributes, Xueqi suddenly found that he had lost the ability to roast it. Well, he didn't know where to start even if he wanted to. On the other side, he encountered a problem that he had never thought of before he came to Azeroth. Because of his weight, buoyancy, and the laws of the world, he could not use any teleportation or flying skills in Azeroth. This meant that he had to walk to the Well of Eternity. The endless ocean separated the Eastern Kingdom and the Kalimdor continent. This was not a problem for him. Demons did not need to breathe anyway, so he walked directly to the bottom of the sea from the South Stream coast. Originally, with his speed, even if he walked, he would definitely cross the endless ocean in more than a week. In theory that was the case. However, he was tricked. 10,000 meters under the sea, he could not even see his fingers in front of him. The only thing he could rely on was his perception of the continent's magnetic field. However, an intelligent existence that had a deep-seated hatred for Archimonde cleverly used a magic tool to interfere with Archimonde's perception, causing this demon commander to foolishly run to the center of the endless ocean. One must know that the center of the ocean was not once a sea. This was the center of the ancient war 10,000 years ago. The location of the Well of Eternity. The big explosion back then had blown the continent into pieces. And the remaining super-high energy vortex had become a vortex trap that even Archimonde could not easily escape from. He was directly trapped. In the distance, a female Naga with 6 arms used a special underwater communication method to ask her leader, "My lord, aren't we indirectly helping the night elves who exiled us back then?" The Naga leader with a huge body and incomparably seductive upper body replied, "Perhaps. But those bastards from the Burning Legion. They actually dumped such disgusting pollutants into the sea. If I don't take revenge, how can I vent my anger? Impressively, there was an ugly corrosion mark on her collarbone above her left chest. Women all loved beauty. Even if they had fallen from the beautiful high elves to the Naga with a snake lower body, they had never forgotten their natural love of beauty. Because of Du's shameless actions in the Well of the Sun, the Naga of the deep sea had fallen for it, and then Archimonde had inexplicably been implicated. Fortunately, Duque did not know. Otherwise, that bastard Duque would only have laughed 3 times. No one had thought that things would actually turn out like this, buying incomparably precious time for the creatures on the 2 continents. If Archimonde had arrived within a week, it was obvious that many things would have immediately collapsed. For example, Jaina, who had just landed in Theramore. For example, the tribal army that had arrived not much earlier than Jaina. And then there was Duque's side. 2 incomparably exquisite invitations were almost sent to Duque's hands at the same time. When Duque saw it, his eyes widened. It must be something important for Mograine to abandon the army and personally come to invite Duque. Her Majesty Queen Kalia's official ascension to the throne. Please do me the honor of attending the ceremony. Next to her, also very familiar to Duque, was the youngest of the Windrunner family, Lilith. Second sister is going to be queen, remember to come. Chapter 859. One of his own was going to be a queen, and it was 2 queens ascending the throne at once. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, worthy of celebration and celebration. However, if 2 queens who were close to him ascended the throne on the same day, then it would not be fun at all. A certain Du once had a dream, and that was to use the kingdoms that had sunk in the history of the Alliance as sampans. He would make one sampan after another into a chain of ships, and then build an unsinkable aircraft carrier to ride on the sea. Now, the aircraft carrier had yet to appear, and the 2 large ships in his base were in danger of capsizing at the same time. At this moment, a certain Du thought of a certain pitiful person who was killed by his girlfriend with a hatchet. At this moment, a certain Du thought of the Alliance starting a civil war against the Elven Ranger because of him. At this moment, a certain Du thought of the Lordaeron Paladin angrily confronting the Elven Ranger. Duque's reaction was that of a dumbfounded one. At this moment, Duque, who was in the Dalajan Ruins military camp, would never know that at this moment, in the gorgeous Lordaeron Palace cum castle in the center of the holy city of Stratholme, 2 women who were about to become the most powerful on the continent were staring at each other. The room was newly cleaned, and most of the decorations in the room were from the time of Lordaeron. However, most of the furniture was very old, although it could still be seen that it had been well maintained and cleaned. The most new things in the room were the paintings hanging on the wall. Kalia, who was dressed in pure white priestly attire, used her soft fingertips to slide across the frame of a well-framed painting. Her thoughts seemed to have returned to the distant end of the river of time. I've been to many places, many of which I've only seen in night novels 13 years ago. I've always been fascinated by these places, but 13 years ago, I thought that I would never have the chance to see these places with my own eyes. I've been to Stranglethorn Vale, and was chased for 3 days and 3 nights by trolls who liked to hunt their heads. From the edge of Zul'Gurub in the east, through Lake Nafaridi, all the way to the Reef Sea in the west. It was only when the murlocs by the sea covered us that we escaped. That time, Lilith alone killed 386 trolls. I've been to the Swamp of Sorrows. At that time, the swamp was still a gloomy and terrifying place. However, in order to connect Overwatch Castle and Reedridge Mountain Fortress into one, Duque carried out a large-scale development there. Riadeline and I pretended to be clerics who came to help and volunteered for half a year. I've also been to Burning Steppes, Scorching Canyon and Barren Lands. I've killed wild wolves with my own hands and killed orcs with Smite. I've seen the pure white snow of Dan Maluo, walked through the mud of the wetland, and almost died in the swamp. From the earthy highlands that were almost razed to the ground after the war, to the thriving Hillsbrad Hills, to the scorched silver pine forest. After that, the 4 of us crossed the ocean to the west and arrived at the Kalimdor continent that most humans and elves had never been to before. We used 8 years to basically wander from the southernmost Tanaris Desert to the more northernmost Azhara and Grey Valley. 2 continents. Dozens of areas. Other than the areas controlled by the High Elves and Night Elves, I've been to all the places that I could go. I've seen with my eyes that should have been imprisoned in Lordaeron's High Tower.
I've touched with my hands that should have only been used for court etiquette and musical instruments, as well as to serve the king's husband. I've felt with my skin that even the amount of time I spend under the sun is limited. I've truly experienced with my soul. Kalia's voice involuntarily became high-pitched. Her fingertips slid across the oil paintings that she had painted with her own hands, evoking all the memories that had made her happy, made her sad, inspired her, and made her sad in the past 13 years. When the memories of the paintings appeared in her mind again, she couldn't help but complete another spiritual journey. At this moment, Servanas, who was supposed to stay and quell the loss, unexpectedly appeared here. He had been sitting quietly on the guest seat in the middle of the room since the beginning, gently sipping his black tea. He put down the teacup in the most elegant manner, and in the interval between the queen-to-be Kalia, who was immersed in her memories, he finally spoke. Servanas used a sonorous and powerful voice to narrate a cruel truth that hit the nail on the head. So what? Princess Kalia. Have you ever thought about it? It might have been intentional. It might have been unintentional. The result is that you became a hidden pawn in Duque's hands for 13 years. Kalia's movements suddenly stopped, as if she had been hit by a spell that stopped time. Yes. Servanas was right. What a coincidence. That kind of coincidence was so perfect that it was hard not to think of it as a conspiracy. Just when Arthas fell into depravity and killed his father, Duque quickly rushed back and took over the most elite army in the whole of Lordaeron. Then, he grandly pushed out Kalia, the golden signboard that no one could refute or oppose. Within a few days, he stabilized the situation of the collapsing Lordaeron. Come to think of it, you Duque, as the deputy commander of the alliance, created the illusion that the princess of the Lordaeron alliance had died tragically. Then, when the kingdom collapsed, you quickly released the princess. If you had to attribute this to a conspiracy theory, it would be really hard to find evidence to refute it. Seeing Kalia's reaction, Servanas elegantly curled his fingers and took another sip of black tea. Then, Kalia smiled. Her bright smile was completely stretched out, immediately making people think of an ocean of flowers blooming in spring. It was a smile that contained everything. A pawn? A conspiracy? Or could it be that Duque had already foreseen all of this, and then thought of how to benefit from it 13 years ago? If this is your question, then my answer is, so what? That. Again. Like, what? Kalia's magnanimous attitude made Servanas a little jealous. Kalia held her head high and chest out. She gracefully walked over with small steps and stood in front of Servanas. That year I was still underage. At that age where women love to fantasize the most, which girl did not fantasize about their Prince Charming? If you ask me who is the Prince Charming in my heart, then from the past until now, there has only been one. At this moment, it was Servanas's turn to freeze. She remained silent and continued to listen to what Kalia seemed to be saying. If this was really a conspiracy, then Duque should have used my affection for him 13 years ago to completely possess me. When I came back to my senses, maybe I would already be the mother of several children, and each child's surname would be Marcus. By the time my evil brother killed my father, Menethil's blood had already been changed to Marcus's. Chapter 860. Kalia's voice was not loud, but each word was like a needle, stabbing into Sylvanas's chest. If Duque had not saved me back then what awaited me would have been a full 13 years of house arrest. It would have been a hopeless, gloomy life. But what did Duque give me? Freedom. From birth until now, half of my life's worth of freedom. I can do whatever I want, go wherever I want, be it mountains or seas, or swamps or jungles. My 3 companions will accompany me, and do their best to ensure my safety. If this is also Duque's plot to capture my heart, then he has succeeded. I will have no regrets even if I have to sacrifice myself, or the entire Lordaeron. Freedom. What a precious word. If it were a high elf, it would easily be 1,000 years of imprisonment. For a windrunner, he would probably commit suicide in a few years. Sylvanas was extremely intelligent. Although she did not like to use her intelligence in politics and conspiracies, she had already vaguely understood why Kalia had sent a secret letter to find her, and wanted to talk to her face to face. She gently put down the teacup of black tea, and placed her left elbow on the armrest of the chair. Her palm rested on her cheek, and she made an elegant and relaxed posture. Well then, why do you insist on setting our Ascension Day on the same day?
Are you forcing Duque to make a choice? Kalia laughed instead. Like a lover asking for favors? Or are you putting the country on a scale and forcing Duque to weigh it? How is this possible? He has never been a man who would change his decisions because of power.
If that was the case, he would have become my legal husband long before that so-called Lord of Presto.
Sylvanus's beautiful eyes turned. Then what do you mean? If not for Duque, both Lordaeron and Quel Salis would have been destroyed long ago. Since we both had our hearts set on the same man, even if Duque was unable to establish the next Arajuo Empire in the future, we should at least let Duque have an alliance where he could use his talents as he pleased. I plan to let the Rotterdam Kingdom give up their position as the leader of the alliance. Even so, I hope that Duque's resolution will get a majority of votes in the alliance. Sylvanus narrowed her eyes. You mean that our two countries should advance and retreat together?
Kalia said firmly. Yes. From the military to politics to the economy, they advanced and retreated together in all aspects.
If possible, I hope that Miss Alucia can rebuild Alterac. With the addition of the Dalajan, which is destined to be controlled by the Breaking Dawn wizard Duque, and Stormwind, which has always supported Duque, we will have at least 5 votes. Servanas rubbed his eyebrows. Kalia had formed a harem alliance.
As someone who had helped Duque guard his home for 10 years, and her fourth sister had always followed Kalia, she obviously knew that Duque had been a gentleman to Kalia for 13 years.
Yet it was like this. Even if Kalia was rejected by Duque emotionally, she still wanted to become Duque's hardcore supporter. This made Sylvanus a little speechless. No matter what, the two neighboring countries had a common enemy and common interests. In addition, their leaders were all loyal to the same man. It would be unreasonable not to unite. If they wanted to be jealous, they would have done so long ago. In any case, the 3 sisters would be by Duque's side in the future. This was an absolute advantage. After thinking about it, Sylvanus sighed helplessly and stretched out his hand.
I can't think of any reason to refuse.
All right, we can only let that rascal Duque take advantage of it. Kalia smiled brightly. 2 beautiful hands, 2 hands with the most power in the continent, were held together just like that. Then, let us discuss the details of the coronation ceremony. On Duque's side, a completely dumbfounded Duque was pacing back and forth. Lillis was careless, and did not know the key point at all. Mograine smiled bitterly. Of course, he understood his queen's thoughts. Perhaps on a national level, even if the Rotterdam lost 2/3 of its territory, it would still be able to suppress the elves in terms of national power. In terms of relationships, Queen Kalia had not entered Duque's circle at all. He subconsciously thought that the queen was messing around, and would definitely make Duque unhappy. Didn't the dignified Princess Curtiris's marriage break off just because Duque said so?
On the other side, William secretly asked Anduin, Uncle, this is... Anduin rolled his eyes.
First, I'm not good at this kind of thing with women. Second, no outsider can save Duque from this kind of thing. So, let's just watch the show. William sighed along with him. In the end, Duque had no choice but to secretly ask for Alucia's opinion. However, Alucia smiled. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Although Her Highness Kalia has become more opinionated after becoming an adult, they are not unreasonable people. Duque was exasperated. Then what is this? Coronation on the same day? Both of them are treating me. Do you want me to rush to the venue, or do you want me to clone myself thousands of kilometers away? No matter what I do, it will be disrespectful to the other country. Alucia let out a clear laugh.
She covered her mouth and laughed without saying a word.
Ha 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 ha. That night, a new piece of news came, shocking Duque and the other big shots of the alliance. Queen Kalia's coronation ceremony was not in the holy city of Stratholme as everyone had imagined. Queen Sylvanus's coronation ceremony was not in the ruins of Silver Moon City. The reason why the 2 queens chose to coronate on the same day was that both countries had a common enemy, the Death Knight Arthas and the Scourge Army. In order to rebuild the kingdom and work together in the post-alliance era, the 2 queens jointly decided to hold the coronation ceremony on the 25th of September at the Salis Trail on the border between the 2 countries. In a sense, as a big country, Rotterdam had made more concessions. Silvermoon City had become history, and the reconstruction of the new Silvermoon City was still far away, but Stratholme was still there. Moreover, the power of the 2 countries was disproportionate. Even though they were facing a disaster now, Rotterdam still had more than 1 million soldiers and civilians in the eastern plaguelands. And Xueqi only had a little more than 100,000 elves left. But Queen Kalia was determined to do it. Unable to convince Kalia, Mograine and the others could only pinch their noses and accept it. Time flew, and the day arrived in the blink of an eye. When Xueqi arrived at the scene, he was a little dumbfounded. Miraculously, there were 2 coronation thrones, or rather, half of a country. This was because the southern half of the rank 9 throne had the typical Rotterdam style, luxurious and exaggerated. Although the northern half also had the gorgeous artistic style of the High Elves, because the queen was a ranger, there were many more elements of the forest. Frankly speaking, these 2 combinations looked neither fish nor fowl when looked at together. Unfortunately, all of this was not the main point. You put a chair in between the 2 queens' thrones. What are you trying to do? Xueqi was under a lot of pressure. Chapter 861. As the Storm Grand Duke and the commander of the alliance, Xueqi was definitely qualified to attend the coronation ceremony of the 2 queens. But to sit on the seat that was side by side with the throne, this was too much. The moment he saw that seat, Xueqi realized that the seat that was on the same level as the throne was probably for him. Almost immediately, he decided that it was not appropriate. In the huge tent that was temporarily set up, as soon as the outsiders were chased away, Xueqi flew into a rage on the spot. In front of the 2 queens, Xueqi asked directly, "What are you doing? Who is that seat for? Don't tell me you want me to sit on it." "Yes, it's for you," Servanas answered without hesitation. Xueqi gritted his teeth. "Why?" When the alliance was first established, the kings made a declaration that no commander's position could be higher than the king's. The commander is just a coordinator, not a ruler. Servanas threw out an answer that Xueqi had never thought of. "Because you inherited the will of Alonsis Fail." "But I'm a mage." Xueqi looked constipated. "I asked Riadeline. When you and I attacked together, the golden soul coin that you made should be condensed from the will of the former Archbishop of Holy Light. Am I right?" Xueqi was speechless. At the side, Kalia began to sing. Why did the Calamity Army invade so quickly? Why did Lordaeron and Xueqi collapse so easily? Why did the Church of the Cursed easily infiltrate the upper echelons of the 2 kingdoms? The former prince of Lordaeron has fallen. Servanas continued, the king of Xueqi has also fallen. And Darkan and the other members of the Silver Moon Council. Kalia continued, doesn't this show how much harm the lack of faith has caused to the world? So after our discussion, the upper echelons of the 2 kingdoms unanimously decided that from the day we ascend the throne, to fight against evil and to purify ourselves, the 2 kingdoms will worship the Church of the Holy Light as the national religion. We will vigorously promote the training of priests and paladins. Servanas continued, at the same time, the elites of our 2 countries will be under your command to deal with the upcoming Arkharan Crusade. They made so much sense that Xueqi had nothing to say. If they wanted to push Xueqi out from a personal point of view, Xueqi would not agree no matter what. The problem was that Xueqi had indeed inherited Alonsis' moral integrity. There was no way to deny it. After all, Xueqi had been the last person to see the Archbishop of the Church of the Archbishop. At that time, all the clergies in Stratholme saw the Archbishop give Duke a Holy Light inheritance. Of course, the position of Archbishop of the Holy Light was passed on to Uther. The problem was that the Church of Holy Light pursued selflessness and dedication too much, which actually conflicted with the interests of the nobles. Even though Uther was the Archbishop of the Church of the Holy Light, when Uther and Arthas clashed, Terenas, who was determined to have more royal power than divine power, demoted Uther. Even though Uther also held the position of Archbishop of the Holy Light, when Uther and Arthas had a conflict, Terenas, who was determined to have more royal power than divine power, immediately demoted Uther. Now, there were many people who had the Holy Knight's legacy, but they were all fighting. There was no one who could truly represent the will of the Holy Light. Now, there were many people who had the Holy Knight's legacy, but all of them were fighters. There was no one who could truly represent the will of the Holy Light. It was not impossible to bring up Xueqi from this angle. Kalia added fuel to the fire. Xueqi, just agree. Now that there is a craze for revenge in both kingdoms, I feel that there is a need to properly guide this hatred.
Mograine, Abendis, and Dathrahan all believe that you, who have the true legacy of Archbishop Fail, can indeed represent the will of the Holy Light.
At this time Elucia, who had been following behind Duque silently, said to Duque, Turayan and Windsor have also agreed.
Sylvanas narrowed her eyes. Riadeline, who is about to form the Holy Knights in our kingdom, also thinks that you are very suitable.
Duque suddenly realized that he had been sold out by his women. If he did not stand up, he might really let the historical Scarlet Crusade rise again. Since ancient times, countless history had proven that fanatics were not destined to have a good ending. It was precisely because of their extreme nature that extremists would never receive the support of the masses. Since he had already saved Mograine and Abendis, he would not be able to forgive himself if he allowed them to go back to their old ways.
Duque scratched his head. All right, you've convinced me. Although in a way that I hate.
In the big tent, the three women showed expressions of joy at the same time. Elucia said with a smile, Are you done with your official business? Now that the official business was done, it was time for private matters. Suddenly, the two queens, who had been so majestic just a moment ago, flinched a little at the same time. Of course, Queen Kalia's reaction was slightly bigger. Knowing that she could not avoid it, Kalia stepped forward and bowed deeply. I'm sorry. This time I was the one who suggested this first.
Sylvanas indifferently interjected. But I agreed.
Agreeing meant that she was an accomplice. Queen Sylvanas was quite loyal. Duque put his hands on his hips. I don't understand. What are you trying to achieve by doing this?
Kalia raised her head. I just want to tell you in the world that the two of us and the kingdom behind us will support you unconditionally.
Have you considered the reaction of the other kingdoms? What do you want Magni to think? What do you want Daylin to think? What do you want Varian to think? No, I think they will value your voice more. Now that the demon commander of the Burning Legion has arrived, according to Mediva's prophecy, there will be more crises of world destruction coming to Azeroth. What we need is a more united alliance, a single correct voice. Of course, Duque knew that his actions in the future were correct. After all, the general trend was still going in that direction. He was also sure that most of his opinions were correct. But at this point, was the alliance still the alliance? Duque could not help but feel puzzled.
Elucia spoke. Duque, you have not been here for the past 10 years.
That's why you don't know how serious the internal strife within the alliance has been.
If it wasn't for the Stormwind Kingdom and the Iron Furnace Fort holding the fort, the alliance would have withdrawn the army from the watchtower and cancelled the surveillance of the Burning Steppes and Scorching Canyon.
Bastard! You're asking for it.
Duque could not suppress his anger.
Sylvanas blinked. That's why we're doing this, to give you more authority. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.